Cold stone presses into your spine, not metaphorically, literally. Limestone leaches heat from bone faster than night air ever could, and the cave floor is wet enough that your cloak never dries. You stopped feeling your toes before dawn. Now you don't feel them at all. Below you, the valley tightens into a throat. You can hear the army before you see it. Metal on leather, the dull knock of spear butts against shields, men coughing in formation because cold air burns lungs that grew up breathing dust and heat. Too many men. Even without counting, you know it. Sound carries weight. This sound is crushing. Someone whispers your name, not loud enough to be prayer, not soft enough to be calm. You lean forward and risk a look. They're packed so tightly the river can't be seen between them. Just helmets, banners, horses sweating steam into the morning fog, cavalry that can't move because the ground is wrong, the slope wrong, the space wrong. Men shoulder to shoulder in a place that only forgives single file, the kind of mistake that only happens when you've never been hungry in these mountains. Your jaw aches from clenching. Hunger does that too. Your body has been eating itself for weeks. Fat first, then muscle. The honey scraped from rock seams buys days, not strength. Every man behind you smells like iron and old sweat, and sickness held at bay by fear. A figure rides forward on a mule, not armoured, no weapon. A man who still believes words matter more than angles. You don't step out yet. You wait. Discipline is the only luxury starvation leaves you. He calls up to the cave. Your language. His voice echoes badly, fractured by stone, but the meaning survives. Surrender. Reality. Numbers. He doesn't threaten. That's worse. He's offering you a future that requires you to kneel. Behind you, someone breathes too fast. Another man's teeth chatter, not from cold, from calculation. You feel it ripple. The weight of the choice. If you go down there, people live. If you stay, people die. Simple math, except it isn't. You step into the light. The cave mouth frames you like a wound in the mountain. You feel exposed immediately, a body outlined against stone. You don't raise your voice, you don't need to. The valley carries it. You tell him no. Not because you think you'll win, not because you believe in miracles, because you've already measured what survival would cost. You've already buried that version of yourself. You step back. For a moment, nothing happens. Then a hand goes up in the valley. Drums answer, low, controlled, professional. The first arrows come fast. You hear them before you see them, a tearing sound like cloth ripped by the wind. They climb steeply, fighting gravity, and you understand immediately what the men below do not. They're aiming wrong. You press yourself flat against the cave wall as shafts slam into stone above you. Wood snaps, iron screams. The sound is sharp, intimate, inches from your skull. Then the screaming changes. Outside. Arrows don't disappear when they miss. They hit. They break. They come back. Stone doesn't absorb. It deflects. The first ricochets drop straight down into the front ranks. Men shout in surprise more than pain. Confusion spreads faster than blood. You don't wait for panic to mature. You raise your arm. The cave explodes behind you. Men pour past, not in formation, not pretty. They run because stopping means dying. Boots skid on wet stone. Someone falls and is dragged upright by his belt without slowing. The first bodies hit the valley floor hard enough to break ankles, but adrenaline carries them forward. Above, the mountain answers. This was never about swords. Swords are for equal ground. You chose gravity. The first boulder goes loose with a sound like a tree splitting. Then another. Logs follow, bound with rope that snaps under load. The gorge becomes a funnel of noise and mass and inevitability. Rocks don't choose targets. They erase space. Below, the army tries to move. It can't. Forward is blocked by bodies and falling stone. Back is blocked by numbers still pushing in, unaware. Horses rear and scream as hooves lose traction. A man is crushed between shield and cliff, ribs folding like wet kindling. This is not a battle. It's physics applied to flesh. You don't shout orders. Everyone knows what to do because there is only one thing to do. Strike, move, strike again. Never stop. Never let them breathe. You come down on an officer first, not because of rank, but because he's pointing. You take his legs out with a short swing and feel bone give. Someone else finishes him. You don't look. Looking wastes time. A man grabs at you, eyes wide, not angry, just lost. You drive your shoulder into his chest and he goes down under the press. The river disappears under bodies, water climbs its banks, red and thick. The smell hits late. Blood is warm. Too warm in cold air. It steams. Somewhere ahead, a mounted figure is trying to turn a horse in a space that doesn't allow it. You see the moment he understands. The horse goes down under falling stone. The man doesn't get up. Command collapses when the body carrying it stops moving. Sound changes again. Orders dissolve into noise. Noise dissolves into screaming. They break. Running in a gorge is worse than standing. Men slip on mud and bodies. They drop shields to move faster and are trampled for it. A few try to climb the slope and are crushed by the next wave of debris. You don't chase yet. You let the mountain finish speaking. When it quiets, what's left is scattered, bleeding, stunned. Survivors stumble east, away from the cave, away from the dead end they marched into. You let them go because exhaustion has teeth too. Your legs shake now that the work is done. Hands cramp around hilts they've held too long. You sit, just for a second. Cold comes back immediately. It always does. Later, much later, you follow. The path they choose looks safer than it is. Limestone fractured by rain, weight balanced wrong. Too many feet, too fast. Fear makes men heavy. You hear it before you see it. A low groan from the mountain, like breath drawn too deep. Then the slope lets go. It isn't dramatic. It's final. Earth moves as one. Stone slides, accelerates, becomes a wall. Men vanish mid-step. Horses are swallowed without sound. The river chokes, backs up, spills into places it's never been. Silence follows, thick and complete. No one speaks. There's nothing left to say. When you turn back toward the cave, the path feels different. Not lighter. Emptier. As if the mountain has decided something and closed the argument. You don't feel victorious. You feel intact. For now, that will have to be enough. You don't wake up after Covadonga. You surface. Sleep comes in fragments now, 10 minutes, maybe less. Jerked apart by muscle spasms, by the sound of rock settling, by the memory of bodies hitting water. Your hands still shake when they're empty. When you grip something solid, the tremor eases. Stone. Wood. A hilt worn smooth by other men who didn't survive long enough to care about comfort. Morning doesn't arrive cleanly in these mountains. Light leaks in layers, diluted by fog, stretched thin by rain that never fully stops. The cave smells different now. Less like fear, more like iron and rot carried upslope by the river. Flies arrive before prayers. You inventory the living without ceremony. Fewer than you expected, more than the valley deserved. Some men can't stand. Others won't sit. A few stare at their hands like they're still deciding whether to believe what those hands did. No speeches, no counting of the dead. You give water where it's needed. You take weapons where they're not. Survival first, meaning later. Scouts come back before the mist lifts. They don't smile. They point. The army didn't regroup. It dissolved. Survivors scattered east, south, anywhere that didn't smell like this gorge. That should be enough. It isn't. There's still a governor. Still a man who thought bloodlines could be erased with paperwork and marriage contracts. Still a city on the coast that believes distance equals safety. You don't announce the march. You just start moving. The body protests immediately. Knees grind. Ankles swell inside boots stiff with dried blood. Hunger returns with a precision that feels personal. You ration anyway. A man who eats too much after starvation gets sick. You've seen it. The body doesn't forgive greed. They follow without being told. The descent from the mountains is worse than the climb. Wet roots, hidden drops. One misstep and you break something that won't heal before winter. You slow the pace until it hurts more to go carefully than to rush. Discipline again. Always discipline. Villagers watch from behind doors, faces half seen through smoke holes and shutters. They don't cheer. They don't hide either. They look at you like men who've just learned a rule changed overnight and haven't decided yet whether it's real. A boy runs alongside for a while, barefoot, keeping pace without breathing hard. He doesn't ask to join. He just watches. You let him. When he turns back, he does it without being told. By the time the land flattens, the air changes. Salt creeps in. Wind moves more freely. Horses would do well here. That's why you won't linger. News travels faster than feet. By the second day, you know he's running. The governor didn't wait for confirmation. He didn't need to. Silence from the valley told him everything numbers couldn't. He gathered what he could carry: gold, guards, documents meant to prove ownership of places that no longer belonged to him, and fled inland. Roads this time. Roman roads. Straight lines meant for legions that believed control was permanent. You cut across them. There's no dramatic pursuit, no banners, no music. Just men moving faster than they should be able to, driven by something that isn't rage anymore. Rage burns hot and brief. This is colder, more efficient. You catch them where the road narrows between low hills. Not a gorge, not a trap worthy of songs, just a place where running becomes pointless. His guards form up. Tired men, paid well, promise safety. You see, the moment they realize neither applies, they fight anyway. People usually do. It's over quickly, not because you're better, because they're done. The governor tries to speak. He's bleeding from somewhere unimportant, the kind of wound that gives false hope. He offers terms with the confidence of a man who still believes hierarchy survives collapse. You don't answer. Someone drags him down from his horse. He lands badly. You hear cartilage tear. He screams, high and uncontrolled, a sound that doesn't fit the man he thought he was. You stand close enough that he has to look at you. He recognizes you. That's the worst part for him. Not the defeat, the recognition, the understanding that this isn't politics anymore. You don't make a spectacle of it. You don't need to. Death is efficient when you stop trying to decorate it. When it's done, the men around you don't cheer. A few exhale like they've been holding breath for years. One sits down hard and laughs once, sharp, then stops as if embarrassed. You leave the body where it fell. The city doesn't resist. Cities rarely do when hills behind them belong to someone else. Gates open, officials kneel. You don't take the city. You don't want it. Ports invite problems. Ports attract attention. You take what matters: weapons, grain, people who want to leave. The return north is slower, heavier. Victory adds weight you have to carry. Men limp now that adrenaline is gone. Infections set in. A cut ignored during the fight swells and darkens. You cut it open yourself when you have to. No one complains. Pain is currency here. Everyone pays. At night, the mountains loom ahead, black against darker sky. You realize something then. Sitting by a fire that barely holds against the damp, you're not going back to hiding. The cave was a throat. This is a spine. When you reach the high valleys again, the silence feels different. Not cautious, expectant. They gather without summons. Families this time. Old men who remember other kings. Women who don't ask what happened, only where to stand. Children who treat weapons like tools, not symbols. You don't crown yourself. That would require certainty. You don't have that. What you have is momentum and a geography that punishes mistakes. They raise you anyway, not with gold, with hands. Shields lifted, arms straining, wood creaking under your weight. It's unstable, dangerous, honest. From up there, you see it clearly for the first time. Not a kingdom. A pocket of refusal. A place where time slowed enough for choices to matter again. When they set you down, your legs buckle. Someone catches you. You nod thanks and move on. Dependency is another luxury you can't afford yet. Night comes. Fires dot the slopes. Meat roasts. Real food. You force yourself to eat slowly. The body resists recovery as fiercely as it resisted starvation. Later, alone, the shaking returns. You wash your hands in cold water until feeling dulls. Blood swirls away, thins, disappears. It always does. Memory doesn't. You think of the valley, of the sound stone makes when it decides, of the governor's eyes when the world stopped agreeing with him. This isn't the end of anything. It's the beginning of maintenance. Mountains don't win wars, people do, and people wear out. You sit with that thought until the fire dies and cold takes its place, steady and familiar, pressing into your spine like the cave once did. Still here, it says, still breathing. For now. Winter doesn't arrive in the mountains. It tightens. Cold comes first, then silence. Streams slow, then lock. Paths you crossed without thinking turn into traps that punish hesitation. Breath burns going in, and knives going out. You learn quickly which men cough and which don't. The ones who cough don't last. You reorganize without ceremony. Not units, functions. Who can hunt without sound? Who can move injured men without stopping? Who can kill quickly in tight spaces and who panics when the ground drops away? This isn't an army. It's a system built to absorb loss. The South doesn't forget you. It just recalculates. The first raid comes before the snow settles. Fast cavalry probing the edges, testing villages that sit too far from stone. You don't meet them head on. You don't need to. You let them take grain from a place already emptied. Let them feel successful. Success makes men careless. On the way back, a bridge collapses. Old wood. Too much weight. 3 riders go into the river. 2 crawl out screaming, armour dragging them down. You take them from the bank with thrown spears. The others run. They always do. This becomes routine. Pressure. Release. Pressure again. You don't chase glory. You chase exhaustion. Every raid costs them more than it costs you. Horses need feed. Men need roads. You need neither. You live where maps give up. Food becomes the war, not battles. Calories. Salt. Fat. You trade iron for dried meat. You move families higher when valleys can't support them. Some complain. Most don't. Complaints burn calories too. Bodies change. Leaner. Harder. Faces cut sharp by hunger and wind. Scars don't heal pretty anymore. They just close enough to keep moving. You lose people quietly. A fall. A fever. A cut that turned black overnight. No markers. The mountain remembers. That's enough. In the south, they argue. You know because the raids change shape. New commanders bring new habits. They try columns. They try winter camps. They try bribery. Gold moves uphill in small bags carried by men who smile too easily. You send them back without fingers. Spring breaks the mountains open with violence. Ice melts fast. Rivers swell and tear away anything that trusted them. Paths reappear wrong. Landslides expose bones that don't belong to animals. You push south then, not far. Enough to remind them the border breathes. Open ground feels obscene now. Too much sky. Too many directions danger can come from. Men tighten unconsciously when trees thin. You keep movements short, sharp, then retreat before comfort sets in. Comfort kills faster than blades. A rumour spreads, not a story, a calculation. That coming north costs more than it's worth. That the land eats men. That victory here doesn't look like victory anywhere else. You encourage that. Survivors are released on purpose sometimes. You make sure they see the right things. Empty valleys, burned crops, men who don't beg. By the second winter, children are training. Not with ceremony, with chores that harden hands and lungs. Carrying water uphill, learning where sound travels, learning when to stop moving. You watch one boy slip on ice and recover without panic. Body low, weight distributed. He doesn't look back for approval. Good. You don't sleep much. Leadership steals rest the way cold steals heat. Slowly, without asking. When you do sleep, you dream of spaces too wide to control. Plains, cities, noise that doesn't echo. You wake grateful for stone overhead. The South sends an offer, formal this time. Paper, seals, promises of autonomy under distant authority. It's a smart move, cheaper than blood. You burn it without reading aloud. Not because it's insulting, because it misunderstands the problem. Authority that can't enforce itself here doesn't exist. You're not rebelling anymore. You're occupying time. Years passed like this, not counted, lived. The mountains change you. You stop thinking in seasons and start thinking in thresholds. How much snow before movement stops? How many men before a camp gives itself away? How many losses before a group fractures? You adapt faster than they do because adaptation is all you do. There's a moment, no one marks it, when you realize they're no longer planning to destroy you. Just contain you. Raids get smaller, less frequent, more defensive. Containment is victory of a sort. You don't push it. You let them have their illusion of control. Meanwhile, valleys behind you fill. Slowly. carefully. People return to places once stripped bare. Fields are worked shallow to avoid attention. Churches are built low and thick, more bunker than sanctuary. Law emerges the way paths do, by use, by correction. Disputes settle quickly because unresolved conflict wastes energy everyone needs. Theft punished harshly because it threatens survival. Mercy applied selectively because mercy that weakens the whole is just delayed violence. You age. It shows in joints before it shows in face. Cold never leaves once it settles in bone. You adjust. Delegate more. Trust men who've proven they don't need watching. One night, you sit above a valley watching fires blink on one by one. Controlled, hidden, enough to cook, not enough to signal. You realize you're watching infrastructure, not rebellion. The war hasn't ended, it's changed state. You're no longer the hunted thing in a cave, you're the terrain. That's when the fear finally hits you. Not fear of death, fear of success, of becoming fixed, predictable, of building something that can be targeted. You push that thought away. Tomorrow brings enough problems. Snow starts again before dawn. Light flakes. Quiet. The kind that erases tracks if you wait long enough. You stand and let it collect on your shoulders, feeling the weight accumulate. Still here, still holding. The mountains haven't rejected you yet. Age announces itself in small betrayals. A knee that doesn't lock. Fingers that fumble knots they've tied 1,000 times. You notice it first in the dark when the cold wakes you, and the body takes longer to answer. Power changes shape around you. It no longer needs your voice to move. Orders travel without you. Decisions are made, executed, reported. This is success, you remind yourself. This is what survival looks like when it scales. It's also when mistakes start happening, not tactical ones, human ones. A valley repopulated too fast, fields worked too openly, smoke rising straight instead of broken by wind and tree cover. You see it from the ridge and feel the familiar tightening in your chest, the one that means correction will cost blood. You pull people back. Again. They complain this time, quietly, respectfully, but the sound is there. They talk about children, about hunger, about how long this has already lasted. You don't argue, you just move them. The mountain doesn't negotiate, and neither can you. The south notices the smoke too. The raid that follows is heavier than the last. Better planned. Infantry this time, not just cavalry probing for weakness. They march with supply animals, with intent to stay longer than a night. You don't give them a battle, you give them absence. Villages empty before they arrive. Grain burned, wells fouled, livestock driven uphill into places hooves hate. The enemy enters a landscape stripped down to stone and rain. For 3 days, nothing happens. That's the point. Men grow careless when nothing happens. Patrols stretch, camps loosen, fires burn longer for warmth. You wait until the 4th night, when exhaustion dulls the edge and discipline slips from habit into effort. Then you cut. Not deep, not decisive. Enough to wake them screaming. Enough to force armour on in the dark, boots half-laced, orders shouted into trees that swallow sound. You take 2 sentries and vanish. You kill a pack animal and leave it where it falls so the smell carries. You don't attack the camp, you attack sleep. By dawn they're hollow-eyed. By the 2nd night they're angry. Anger makes men loud. The rain helps you. It always does. On the 5th day they withdraw, not routed, worn down. They leave behind equipment they can't carry anymore. You collect it later, silently, like scavengers after a storm. This pattern repeats until it stops being tested. Years grind forward. Children become adults who've never known flat ground as home. They walk with mountain balance, bodies angled slightly forward like they're always climbing. Their reflexes are different, faster, quieter. They don't remember the cave. They don't need to. Stories harden. Covadonga becomes less a place and more a proof. You hear it retold with edges smoothed, numbers sharpened, fear replaced by purpose. You correct it when you can, not because truth matters more than morale, but because lies rot from the inside. You were hungry, you tell them. You were afraid. You bled. Some listen, some don't. Power attracts things you don't want. Men who speak well. Men who want symbols. Men who think survival deserves ornament. You keep them at arm's length. Symbols draw attention. Attention draws armies. Still, A structure forms around you whether you approve or not. Councils, judgments, borders defined less by lines than by where people stop disappearing. One winter, a sickness comes up from the lowlands, not carried by soldiers, by trade. Fever that doesn't care which side you're on. You lose more people that year than in any raid. You order isolation, valleys sealed, movement restricted. It feels like siege from the inside. People obey because they've learned what disobedience costs, but resentment simmers. When spring comes, fewer fires light. You feel it then, not despair, fatigue, the deep kind that doesn't lift with sleep. You start training replacements for yourself without naming it. Younger men take lead in raids, others manage movement, supplies, disputes. You intervene less, watch more. Watching is harder. The South sends fewer men now, but better ones. Commanders who understand terrain, who don't chase shadows, who build roads slowly, stone by stone, closer than you like. You sabotage them, repeatedly. It slows them, but it doesn't stop the idea. You realize something fundamental has shifted. They're no longer trying to conquer you, they're trying to outlast you. Empires are patient when they have time. You counter with the only thing you have that scales faster than manpower: emptiness. Entire stretches are cleared again, not destroyed, paused. You turn land into a buffer that eats logistics. It works, but it hurts. You see it in faces that have already been uprooted once. That night, alone, you admit what you've avoided. This can't go on forever. Not like this. You gather the council, not to announce change, to feel resistance to it. There is less than you feared. They're tired too. You don't talk about peace. Peace implies terms. You talk about rhythm, about when to press and when to vanish, about letting the mountains do more of the work again. Gradually, the pressure eases. The war settles into something colder, slower. Borders breathe but don't surge. Life thickens behind the lines. You spend more time in the high places now, where sound thins and thought stretches. Your body resents the climb, but your mind steadies there. One morning, you don't go down with the others. You sit. Watch clouds drag shadows across valleys you once emptied by force. Now they hold fields again, carefully, quietly. You feel no pride, just wait. When you descend, it's at dusk. Fires are lit. People greet you with familiarity, not awe. This pleases you more than it should. That night you sleep deeply for the first time in years. In the dark the mountains hold, as they always have, and for once you let them. You know the end is coming long before it arrives. Not as fear, as logistics. Cold mornings linger in the joints even when the sun climbs. Breath shortens on inclines you once took without thought. Pain no longer fades after movement. It settles, permanent, like a stone placed deliberately where it will always be felt. You adjust. Fewer climbs, shorter patrols, more listening. The world you built doesn't need you the way it once did. That's the success and the wound. Orders move without your voice. Disputes resolve without your presence. Men argue, decide, act. Sometimes they're wrong. They fix it. You let them. The South still exists. It always will. But it feels farther away now, not because distance increased, but because relevance decreased. Raids have become formalities, ritual gestures to remind each other the border isn't imaginary. They come, they test, they leave, no drama. Children born after the cave now stand watch. They don't talk about conquest. They talk about harvest yield, about snowfall, about whether a bridge will hold another winter. This is what winning looks like when you strip it of banners. You spend more time near water. Rivers don't care who won yesterday. They cut, persist, erase. Watching them steadies the mind. One evening you feel it sharply, not pain. Absence. The body doesn't respond fast enough to keep balance on wet stone. You catch yourself, but the message is delivered cleanly. You won't die in battle. That realization doesn't disappoint you. It clarifies things. You call the council without urgency. They come anyway. Habits built under pressure don't fade quickly. You don't announce succession. You don't need to. Everyone knows who already carries weight. You speak briefly, about continuity, about not mistaking endurance for destiny, about how quickly the mountains punish arrogance, no matter how justified it feels. They listen. Some nod. Some don't. That's acceptable. The winter that follows is mild, suspiciously so. Snow comes late, thin, rivers run high but calm. People comment on it as if weather has intentions. You feel weaker during it. Fever 1 week, shaking chills another. You recover slower each time. When spring arrives, you ask to be taken back to the cave, not for ceremony, for calibration. The climb is humiliating. Hands help where pride once sufficed. You ignore the looks, bodies fail. It's not moral. Inside, the cave is smaller than memory allowed. Stone hasn't changed, you have. You sit where you once pressed yourself flat under arrows that came back wrong. You remember the smell, fear and limestone and hunger. You remember the sound of arrows breaking, the brief window where physics outweighed numbers. You don't romanticize it. You never did. This was never about destiny. It was about refusing erasure long enough for something sturdier to form. You leave before dusk. No one asks why you came. They don't need to. The fever returns hard that night. This time it doesn't break cleanly, sweat soaks bedding. Breath rusps shallow. Pain migrates. Impossible to locate. Impossible to escape. You aren't afraid. You're annoyed. There's still work unfinished. Patterns you wanted reinforced. Conversations you postponed because postponement felt infinite. You speak when you can. Short instructions, clarifications. You see people lean in, straining to catch every word as if volume equals permanence. You correct them gently. They already know what to do. Time compresses, days lose sequence, faces blend. Light comes and goes without negotiation. At some point you realize you're not cold anymore. That's when you understand. You ask to be taken outside. They carry you, carefully, awkwardly. The mountain air hits your face sharp and clean, and something inside loosens. You see the valley, fires, fields, movement that doesn't scatter at the thought of approaching riders. This wasn't supposed to last forever. Nothing built from refusal ever does, but it lasted long enough. You breathe in and feel nothing push back. Later, they bury you without excess. Stone, earth, a marker that doesn't demand attention. The mountain accepts the weight easily. Life doesn't pause. Men argue over grazing rights. Someone steals grain and is punished. A child breaks a leg and is carried for days to heal. Rain comes wrong and ruins a field. Another field thrives. The South sends a delegation months later. Formal, curious. They're met, fed, escorted back. No promises exchanged. Years stack quietly. Borders harden into habit. Habit into expectation. The cave becomes a place people visit, not to beg. To remember that terrain matters. That arrogance has mass. That survival isn't pretty. Stories grow. They always do. They say you were fearless. That you never doubted. That the mountain chose you. The men who knew you best don't correct it anymore. They understand what stories are for. The truth remains in the systems you left behind, in how people move when watched, in how they vanish when pressed, in how they refuse flat ground when the sky feels too open. Empires rise and fracture elsewhere. Names change, borders bleed, the mountains hold, they always will. And somewhere in the limestone, water continues its work, slow, patient, unstoppable, reminding anyone who listens that time favours neither conqueror nor rebel, only those who learn when to stand and when to endure.